What if I told you one tiny strip of land has been fought over for so long? It makes the comments section of the internet look peaceful. This is the story of Israel, a land claimed by kings, prophets, conquerors, crusaders, emperors, and modern nations, a place sacred to billions, yet fought over by almost everyone who ever set foot near it. Empires rose trying to control it. Empires fell trying to keep it. Its people were conquered, exiled, scattered, and nearly destroyed. And yet, they kept coming back. To understand why this land matters so much, and why its history feels like one long season finale after another, we need to go all the way back to the beginning. The story starts in the Levant, on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, in a region known in antiquity as Canaan. And Canaan was not some random patch of land. It was basically the ancient world highway interchange. To the south was Egypt. To the east, Mesopotamia. To the north, Anatolia. To the west, the Mediterranean Sea connecting it to the wider world. If you control Canaan, you control a major crossroads of trade, culture, armies, and ideas. That is why so many people wanted it. One of the oldest cities in the world, Jericho, rose here. It was already ancient when much of the rest of civilization was still figuring things out. We're talking about a city so old it makes Rome look like a startup. Over time, the Canaanites emerged and built city-states, traded with neighbors, and worshipped many gods, like most societies in the region. But then, according to Jewish tradition, something world-changing began. A man named Abraham was called by God to leave Mesopotamia and journey to Canaan. That story became the foundation of Judaism, one of the world's first major monotheistic faiths. Then came Isaac, Jacob, and Jacob's 12 sons, who became the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. So right from the start, this is not just a story of a land. It is a story of a people, a promise, and an identity. Eventually, the story moves to Egypt. According to tradition, the Israelites ended up there during a famine, and over time their fortunes changed dramatically. What began as survival turned into oppression. Then enters one of history's most iconic figures, Moses. If ancient history had superheroes, Moses would be one of them. Raised in Pharaoh's world, forced into exile, then called by God to the burning bush, Moses returned to confront Egyptian power with one unforgettable demand: "Let my people go." What followed, according to tradition, were the plagues, the Exodus, and the crossing of the Red Sea. It is one of the most famous liberation stories ever told. Then at Mount Sinai, Moses received the 10 Commandments, giving the Israelites not just freedom, but law, identity, and covenant. After years of wandering in the desert, the Israelites approached the Promised Land. Moses saw it, but did not enter. That task fell to Joshua. Under Joshua, the Israelites entered Canaan, but unity did not last. Instead, the tribes entered a chaotic era ruled by judges. These were part military leader, part spiritual guide, part emergency fix. Think of it like a nation constantly switching to crisis mode, because the group chat can never stay organized. That changed in the 11th century BC, when the tribes united under their first king, Saul. Saul helped turn a loose tribal confederation into something more like a state, especially to defend against enemies like the Philistines. But the most famous early king was not Saul. It was David. Yes, the same David from David and Goliath. The young shepherd who defeated a giant with a sling became king and transformed Israel. He captured Jerusalem and made it the political and spiritual center of the kingdom. That decision changed world history, because Jerusalem would go on to become one of the most important and contested cities on earth. Under David, Israel expanded and centralized. Under his son Solomon, it reached its height, and Solomon's biggest achievement was the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem. This temple became the spiritual heart of Jewish life. But Solomon's building projects came at a cost: heavy taxes and forced labor. And as usually happens when leaders build too much and charge too much, the kingdom cracked. After Solomon's death, the United Kingdom split in two: the Kingdom of Israel in the north, and the Kingdom of Judah in the south. Same people, same roots, different kingdoms, constant tension. It was the ancient equivalent of a messy breakup, where both sides still live on the same street. and that division made both kingdoms vulnerable. In 722 BC, the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom. Its people were deported, giving rise to the mystery of the lost tribes of Israel. Then in 586 BC, disaster struck Judah. The Babylonians captured Jerusalem, destroyed the first temple, and exiled many Jews to Babylon. This was one of the defining traumas in Jewish history. The state was gone. The temple was gone. The people were displaced. But the identity survived. That may be the biggest theme in this whole story. Again and again, political power collapses, but the culture and faith endure. Then came a surprising twist. The Persian king Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon and allowed the Jews to return. Suddenly, exile turned into return. The second temple was built in Jerusalem, and Jewish life was rebuilt around law, worship, and scripture. Figures like Ezra helped shape Judaism into something even more durable. Because after exile, Jewish identity became less dependent on one building alone, and more rooted in texts, teachings, and community. That mattered enormously later. Because if your faith lives only in one place, it can be destroyed. If it lives in your people, your memory, and your traditions, it can travel anywhere. Then the next superpower arrived, Alexander the Great. His conquest spread Greek culture across the region. For some Jews, that meant opportunity. For others, it meant pressure to abandon tradition. That conflict exploded under the Seleucid ruler Antiochus IV, who cracked down on Jewish practices and desecrated the temple. The response was rebellion. Led by Judah Maccabee, Jewish fighters launched a revolt and retook Jerusalem. This victory is remembered in the story of Hanukkah. For a time, Jewish rule returned under the Hasmonean dynasty, but internal struggles weakened the state, and soon the next giant stepped in, Rome. And Rome did what Rome often did. It showed up, got involved in local politics, and somehow ended up owning the place. Under Roman influence, rulers like Herod the Great transformed the land with massive building projects, including an expanded Second Temple. But Roman rule brought growing resentment. In 66 AD, the Jews revolted. At first, they had success, but Rome hit back hard. In 70 AD, the Romans captured Jerusalem and destroyed the Second Temple. This was catastrophic. Today, the Western Wall remains as the most sacred visible remnant associated with that temple complex. Another revolt followed in 132 AD, led by Bar Kokhba, but Rome crushed it too. After that, Jews were dispersed even more widely, and Jerusalem was reshaped under imperial rule. This is the beginning of the long diaspora era. As Rome became Christian, Jerusalem gained even greater religious importance. Then in the 7th century, Muslim armies conquered the region. Under Islamic rule, Jewish communities often experienced periods of greater tolerance than under some early regimes, though conditions varied depending on the ruler and the time. Jerusalem became sacred in Islam too. Now one city mattered deeply to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. At this point, Jerusalem was basically the most emotionally overbooked city on earth. Then came the Crusades. In 1099, Crusaders captured Jerusalem and massacred many of its Muslim and Jewish inhabitants. The Crusader period turned the Holy Land into a brutal battlefield. Eventually, Muslim leaders like Saladin reconquered Jerusalem. He defeated the Crusaders and restored Muslim control, though the city remained central to all three faiths. After centuries of conflict, the region eventually came under the Ottoman Empire in 1517. Under the Ottomans, the region experienced long stretches of relative stability. Jewish communities remained in places like Jerusalem, Safed, and Tiberias. Meanwhile, the wider Jewish world continued across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Then the 19th century changed everything. Across Europe, nationalism was rising. People wanted their own states, their own flags, their own futures. And Jews, who had lived as minorities in many lands for centuries, began asking a huge question. What if they had a state of their own too? This idea became known as Zionism. It was shaped by growing anti-Semitism, violent pogroms in Eastern Europe, and a realization that even modern European societies often treated Jews as outsiders. Then came Theodor Herzl, who argued that Jews needed a homeland where they could live in safety and determine their own destiny. For Zionists, that homeland was Palestine, the ancestral land of Israel. Jewish immigration began increasing in waves called aliyahs. Settlers built farms, towns, and new communities. But this also increased tensions with the Arab population already living there. And now the stage was set for the modern conflict. During World War I, the Ottoman Empire sided with Germany and lost. Britain took control of Palestine. In 1917, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration, supporting the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. For Zionists, this was huge. For many Palestinian Arabs, it looked like a foreign power promising their land to someone else. That contradiction became explosive. Under the British Mandate, Jewish immigration increased, especially as Jews fled persecution in Europe. New cities like Tel Aviv grew rapidly. But Arab fears also grew. Riots, uprisings, and violence followed. Britain tried to balance both sides and ended up angering both sides, which, historically speaking, is a very British Mandate move. Then came the darkest chapter of all, the Holocaust. Nazi Germany systematically murdered 6 million Jews. This was not random hatred. It was industrialized genocide. And after World War II, the case for a Jewish state became far more urgent for many Jews around the world. Survivors needed refuge. The old promise that Jews could simply assimilate and be safe had been shattered. Britain, exhausted and under pressure, handed the issue to the United Nations. In 1947, the UN proposed partitioning Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. Jewish leaders accepted the plan. Arab leaders rejected it. And in 1948, as Britain withdrew, David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. For Jews, it was a realization of a 2,000-year-old dream. For Palestinian Arabs, it was a beginning of disaster. Both of those truths shaped everything that followed. The day after Israel declared independence, neighboring Arab states invaded. Israel survived the war and expanded beyond the borders proposed by the UN partition plan. But the war also displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in what they remember as a Nakba or catastrophe. So from the very birth of modern Israel, two national stories collided. For Israelis, independence, survival, return. For Palestinians, dispossession, exile, loss. That is one reason this conflict remains so intense. It is not just about borders. It is about memory, trauma, and identity. Israel then faced repeated wars with its neighbors. In 1956, it fought in the Suez Crisis. In 1967, the Six-Day War transformed the map, with Israel capturing the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai, and Golan Heights. In 1973, Egypt and Syria launched the Yom Kippur War, shocking Israel and proving it was not invincible. Later, diplomacy made breakthroughs. In 1978, Egypt became the first Arab country to make peace with Israel through the Camp David Accords. But the Palestinian issue remained unresolved. The PLO, led by Yasser Arafat, emerged as the leading Palestinian nationalist movement. Then came the First Intifada, the Oslo Accords, the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, the Second Intifada, and the rise of Hamas in Gaza. Peace came close, then slipped away, again and again, like a phone that gets to 99% download and then freezes. Today, Israel is one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world. A country with limited natural resources turned itself into a center of innovation, defense technology, agriculture, medicine, and startups. It built systems like the Iron Dome, developed a major tech economy, and formed powerful alliances, especially with the United States. In many ways, modern Israel is a survival story turned into a state-building story. But the conflict is still unresolved. The status of Jerusalem, the future of the West Bank, the blockade and repeated wars involving Gaza, the role of Hamas, regional threats from groups like Hezbollah, and tensions involving Iran all keep the region unstable. So Israel today is both ancient and modern at the same time, a land of biblical memory and cutting-edge technology, a place of extraordinary resilience and unhealed conflict, a nation shaped by exile, return, faith, fear, ambition, and survival. And that is what makes the history of Israel so powerful. This is not just a history of one country. It is the history of how memory can outlast empire, how identity can survive conquest, how a people could be scattered across continents and still never fully let go of home. But it is also the history of overlapping claims, painful losses, and conflicts that still shape the modern world. Because in this land, history never really stays in the past. It keeps showing up in the present. And that is why the story of Israel remains one of the most important and most contested stories on earth.